evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on another the prelude to our Kingdom Woman Arise Summit. My name is Natisha Plummer. Join us here every Monday from the month of June as we explore the theme Women Arise, God has already approved you, where we will be looking at the original intent of why God made the woman, their unique abilities, and their common purpose alongside the male. This evening's topic is Women Suited for Marriage, the Kingdom Edition. We'll now introduce our guest for this evening.
𝐸𝐭 hails from Brooklyn, New York. She's an active duty U.S. Navy sailor who has been enlisted for the past 15 years, where she has received several prestigious awards. Outside of the military, Mrs. Kang is a dedicated wife, mother, author, image consultant, life coach, thought leader, and influencer. Mrs. Kang is currently pursuing her degree in neuropsychology. She coaches Gen Zs, millennials, and Gen Xers to navigate life's challenges and career paths to balance dealing with relationships, family and military career transition, and a way forward. While being the CEO of Yogi's kids clothing line, she also helps to produce her family top hit YouTube show titled mel'nmo. This has allowed her to be featured on multiple magazines, with her latest cover story in Head and Soul magazine. Her true passion is helping others and watching them evolve into what God has called them to be in style. From dancing together to testing each other.
How's it feeling?
This kingdom marriage has broken every record of the status quo and the conventional. From race to place, Andrea took marriage out of the confines of the rigid four walls of the home to the internet, giving us the real truth of family and marriage in real time. Help us make welcome Andrea Kang.
All about me looking, my God, you're the one for me. You give me good loving. Nothing can compare to this.
Good evening, Mrs. Kang.
Good evening, good evening, good evening.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me. Wow.
Welcome.
That intro was amazing.
Okay. So before you go into your presentation, we have some questions that we would like to ask, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's get into it. So our first question this evening is, how long have you been married and who are you married to?
I have been married for the last 4 years, and I am married to the amazing man in which you guys just saw on video, Mr. 𝚨𝐫𝐢𝐬𝐿.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yes.
Did you always desire marriage?
Did I always desire marriage? That's a good question. To be honest, I've always desired marriage, but I think at some point, at some point in life, my early 20s, I think I desired the idea of marriage more than the actual marriage. I wanted, the glitz, the glamour, the ceremony, all those things instead of focusing on the actual responsibility factor. But yes, I've always desired marriage.
Okay. So how has marriage changed your life? Has it added to you?
Marriage for me has changed my life completely. It honestly caused me to be more selfless rather than selfish. I've learned so much about myself being married, the quirks, the things that I thought were perfectly okay. Now that when you join with somebody else, I'm like, oh, actually, that's not a factor. But it honestly has helped me change my independent standpoint to more of a shared outline, because now I have a helpmate. So it's definitely changed my life.
Okay. Wonderful. What are some of the challenges you encountered in your marriage that you believe were owing to your femininity?
That's a good question. So some of the challenges I faced were, I hope, you know what I mean, I'm relatable to those in the audience. But a lot of times I felt like I was overstepping in certain areas. As a woman, I feel like we are more the technical thinkers, in my opinion. I wouldn't give my husband the opportunity to figure things out, I should say. I think that the alpha female and independent, strong woman factor more so caused me to kind of have a lot of hiccups because I didn't want to let go of that strong, independent sector of my life. I didn't want to lose that sense of having, you know, to do things on my own, especially being in a career where as a leader, as a woman, you fight so much to hold on to that, to show superiority, in the sense that in marriage, I think I caused it to overlap. I didn't decompartmentalize and separate the two. So I think that was a challenge faced to my femininity.
Okay. So do you believe women have been made with unique qualities that can aid in solving these problems?
Absolutely. I believe that women are natural problem solvers. We have the ability to constructively think. Not only are we naturally born with the ability to empathize, but prioritize our feelings as well. We're natural nurturers, in my opinion. I think for a female, our brain has the ability to multitask, whereas a man, they just compartmentalize in a way that if they're watching a game, they can't, and you want to talk to them, they can't separate the two. I see it in my household. So I would say for sure we are born with that ability. Absolutely.
Okay.
Different attributes that help to that.
All right. The marriage by itself comes with a lot of responsibilities, which cause you to get lost in catering to one's self. What advice can you give to young wives who can't keep up with the aesthetics anymore because the responsibilities have been taken priority? So the responsibilities take priority of you taking care of yourself.
Yeah, I understand completely. So in regards to that question, coming from someone who actually in the beginning of marriage lost myself, I would say I started to lose myself. Right. I think the biggest thing was understanding and equipping myself with certain tools in order to be able to get back on track and balance. The thing I would say is you have to give yourself grace. Oftentimes as a woman, we kind of want to tackle everything and put everything on our backs and our shoulders and say, I got it, I can do this, I can help all these different people in different facets when it comes to being a wife and being a mother, that we kind of forget like what's important to us, the individuality sector. So, I mean, for me, it's impossible. I always say it's impossible to pour from an empty cup. And when I say that, I can't give and show up as my best self if I don't have anything to give. So what I need to do is make sure that my cup is full and I'm pouring from an overflow standpoint. So with that being said, to me, it was just like I had to get back and say, all right, who are you outside of this? I had to replace a whole lot of we's with I, because you have to find that sense of individuality and who you are and what are your goals and your passions outside of the marriage, so that you can show up essentially like, okay, I'm here. You can't forget. I'll go on tangent, but yeah, yes, you pretty much have to equip yourself in that way.
Okay.
I'll leave that.
I'm going to touch on your book a little bit. In your book, Perception Wasn't Reality, Trapped by Choice, Freed by Purpose, you made a very thought-provoking statement, and I quote, "We live in fantasy worlds instead of being real with ourselves. Most people on Instagram and Facebook make it seem like they are extremely accomplished. I had to be honest with myself and admit that I'm still working on my goals. I no longer wanted to just look good. I wanted to feel good. End of quote. So how important is being honest with oneself?
Extremely important. When I say extremely, I mean extremely important. For me, in the process of writing that book, it came from a place of understanding from experience. People only show the highlights of life in a still frame or a video format, what have you. Everybody wants to present the polished look, the well together look, when indeed they may be struggling with self-esteem, confidence, whatever you could think of. I realized that by giving myself grace and understanding where I was at in life, I feel like I didn't have to paint the facade anymore. It was unfulfilling, in other words. So in that quote, when I started to actually work on myself as a person all around, now that I was projected to the world, I feel like I didn't have to now come and act as though I was polished. Like, it was more fulfilling, like, no, this is actually really me. Like, I don't have to post the picture and then say, go back into a down state. So that's where that context came from.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yes.
You followed up by saying, God has something good for you, but you have to want it. He will not force it on you. He gives us freedom to choose. I made a choice one day that left me trapped until I was freed by purpose. You can't be who you are going to be and who you used to be at the same time. End of quote. This is so loaded. Touch on that for us a little bit.
Sometimes I look back at this and I'm like, yeah, you actually wrote that. That is amazing. But I'll start off by saying this. We serve a God that has the resources to fix anything. And by anything, I mean just that, right? So oftentimes the enemy will make you feel as though your mistakes or your missteps are permanent, when in actuality, if you allow God to work, he'll pour out his resources to you more than you could ever imagine.
Right.
So for me, sometimes we say we want a thing, but actually behave in the opposite. For instance, with finances, we'll say, God, can you bless my finances? And at the same time, we show no discipline in trying to attain that goal. It's like, Lord, bless me with this money. I cause me to be a good steward. And then you get a piece of money, and at the same time, you don't even know how to control that. So I'm sorry. So for me, faith without works is dead. So in order for the blessing to flow, we need to be open enough to receive it, not just say it, but actually mean it.
Right.
I made a choice back in time, which at a point I felt bound to. I felt as though like, okay, man, with this type of life, this is all people are going to see for me, or I felt like I was wearing it on my skin. But it came to a point when I locked in with God that every mistake, every sin that I felt was on my skin that other people could see me for, God did a trade. He said, I'll take all of this for you to be free and live in your purpose. I've called you for such a time as this. I was given the divine ability when I became humble enough to get help from God, that I think that truly made me understand, like, wow, God really has me and I'm not just making this up in my head. So my purpose and the promise God had for me allowed me to free myself from the shackles that I actually put myself into. Because oftentimes I think we say the enemy, when in actuality, a lot of times we put our own selves in these situations, but we give the devil so much credit and say, it's the devil, he's not. But sometimes, to be honest, it's us. The devil just happens to accompany that. So now walking out in God's given purpose is truly freeing. You can't be who you're going to be and who you used to be at the same time. So when we get in a place where we walking all the way with Christ, we sometimes want to look back at the familiar, if that makes sense. The comfortable place, and you reach back and you like, man, this pleasure was like fulfilling at this point. I don't want to leave it. But the thing is, in order to move forward, you can't look back. That's how I look at life. Your blessing isn't tied to your past. So going forward, I feel like the Bible, certain verses in the Bible that resonated so much to me with 2 Corinthians. And it says, therefore, if any man in Christ, he's a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are becoming new. He didn't say some, but he said all. So for me, I was like, God, this is me, God. I'm in this category. So it's just walking out and making sure you're following up with yourself and keeping yourself accountable. So that's my spiel.
Awesome, awesome. So our final question is, what would you say to women who has no good example of marriage in their lineage? And so the idea of marriage seems far-fetched.
You have to, I like that question. You have to create your own reality. Because I think so much times, even with the bad examples, I feel like in any situation you can take from that and turn that around for your good and know what not to do, right? So for me, you can find people to role model and emulate, but ultimately you want to create what you want your marriage to look like, because what might work for somebody else might not work for you, might not work for your dynamic. So I think that the biggest thing is ultimately creating your own, taking the bad examples you should be learning from and knowing what not to do, and just being you, be authentically you, and what that looks like and shows up for in your marriage.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Ms. Kong.
All right.
Thank you for opening up a little bit to us. I hope our audience are ready. Having known a little bit about who we're going to be hearing from, I hope you are ready. We're just going to go into a 3-minute intermission.
There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, dear Liza. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, a hole.
Well, fix it, dear Henry, dear Henry, dear Henry. Well, fix it, dear Henry, fix it.
With what shall I fix it, dear Liza, dear Liza? With what shall I fix it, dear Liza? With what?
With a straw, dear Henry, dear Henry, dear Henry. With a straw, dear Henry, with a straw.
Oh, the straw is too long, dear Liza, dear Liza. The straw is too long, dear Liza, too long.
Cut it, dear Henry, dear Henry, dear Henry. Well, cut it, dear Henry, cut it.
With what shall I cut it, dear Liza, dear Liza? With what shall I cut it, dear Liza? With what?
With an axe, dear Henry, dear Henry, dear Henry. With an axe, dear Henry, with an axe.
The axe is too dull, dear Liza, dear Liza. The axe is too dull, dear Liza, too dull.
Hone it, dear Henry, dear Henry, dear Henry. Well, hone it, dear Henry, dear... Sharpen it.
On what shall I hone it, dear Liza, dear Liza? On what shall I hone it, dear Liza? On what?
On a stone, dear Henry, dear Henry, dear Henry. On a stone, dear Henry, on a stone.
Stone is too dry, dear Liza, dear Liza. The stone is too dry, dear Liza, too dry.
Wet it, dear Henry, dear Henry, dear Henry. Well, wet it, dear Henry, wet it.
With what shall I wet it, dear Liza, dear Liza? With what shall I wet it, dear Liza? With what?
Try water, dear Henry, dear Henry, dear Henry. Use water, dear Henry, use water.
In what shall I fetch it, dear Liza, dear Liza? In what shall I fetch it, dear Liza? In what?
In the bucket, dear Henry, dear Henry, dear Henry. In the bucket, dear Henry, in the bucket, in the bucket.
There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, dear Liza.
Before we go into the presentation, I want to ask the audience, what have you gotten from this clip?
I'll speak. Hi. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
From my observation, it's that even though he's the head of the house, he still kept deferring to his wife for decisions and how to do something. But she at no point like overstep him. She
Right.
just give him the instructions and allow him to keep coming back to her. Even at some point, I think she started to get a little frustrated, but she maintained her composure and, really was patient with him. And in the end, it was just fun for them both that he probably realized like, man, I'm so needy. That's what I got from it.
Definitely. The part that you said patience, that's the part that we want to highlight. That as a wife, you have to really be patient. And that's why we showed this clip. Okay, so you can now go into your presentation, Ms. Kang.
Presentation. Before I start, I just want to thank God for the opportunity that you guys gave me in order to speak on your platform. I want to give my respect to, I believe, Pastor Snow, as well as Lisa Jennings, who reached out in order for me to be able to speak on tonight. So I just want to start off by saying that I'm extremely appreciative that you guys even considered me. But as the questions were asked before, my name is 𝚨𝐫𝐢𝐬𝐞, and I'm honored to speak to you guys tonight. I am a very interactive person as of late after being on social media, and I would love to engage with the audience rather than sit and talk at you. I want to talk with you. So if that's possible, as much as the audience is led to, I would just ask that one favor as we go through this presentation. I won't be before you long, but I also want to make sure that I'm engaging as well, if that's okay with you guys.
Yes, it is okay with us.
All right. So, suited for marriage. When I first heard the topic, the name, I thought, I'll be honest, my fashion sense mixed in with biblical, I was like, oh, this is a great topic. I have the ability to, come in and give my foresight, I guess, in this area that I almost feel as though I haven't been there that long, but I understand what I want for my life, my marriage, for the present and the future. So I can kind of speak to that. By no means am I an expert in anything of the sort, but I just love the way that God has blessed my family. If I can bless someone else and be that rallying factor, I would love to do that. So before we start, the question I would pose to the audience is, what components do you believe contribute to a successful marriage? Submission. I saw someone say submission. Okay.
And communication, I would say. Yeah.
Submission, loyalty, and honesty. Transparency and being loyal to each other.
I would say patience. Patience, and sometimes you do have to compromise.
Ooh, I think you about to present for me. The reason I said contribute is because there's no formula for what you want your marriage to look like. Every marriage may differ, but I can only speak from my space. But honestly, every dynamic is going to be different in what the qualities are to contribute to what your successful marriage is going to look like. For me, I'll call mine the 4 C's. So I'm going to break those down. The first one is Christ, right? That foundation has to be set on, That foundation has to be set on one thing and one thing only, and that's Christ, right? Being equally yoked with your partner is heavily important, because in order for that foundation to be sturdy, you need to be pouring from the same mix. When problems arise, you know where and who to revert to. The foundation in Jesus Christ. If not for this, then the flesh starts to take over and the arguments and the different things that come in, that'll cause your demise ultimately. Like that causes people to walk away because they don't have that sturdy foundation. Okay, who do we go back to in this? The wife might be the prayer, or the husband is like, oh, I'm not really, or vice versa, because it's not all the time where the wife is that honed in Christian or whatever you have. So when y'all have that foundation together, that makes for a massive type of unity. The second C would be communication. In everything, you need to communicate your feelings, your needs, your wants, and anything that arises. This will help so much instead of keeping things bottled up. It's like a soda. Once it has the cap on and everything is being rattled and shaked, once it's released, that causes for an explosion. So communication has to be one of those things in anything, not just marriage, relationships, whatever it is that we kind of keep with us. Thirdly, I would say compromise. One of the biggest things you'll have to do in marriage is compromise. Not everything will go your way. I learned that so quickly. You can come to a common understanding and a common decision. This helps in ways you could not imagine. You can't just take, and not give. And as a female, I think sometimes we want it to sway to our judgment more so. And for any men in the crowd, they might be able to attest to that. As a female, you almost want to say, it's supposed to be 50-50, but I would rather 70-30, 60-40, if possible, just a little more edge over you in certain situations. But my last C is going to be commitment. You need to be committed not only to God, but to your spouse. When you take your vows, that's a lifelong commitment that you need to stick to in the good times and in the bad. The key is to remember why you took those vows to begin with. Your why will genuinely help navigate any obstacles that could possibly arise. I'm not advocating to stay in an abusive marriage by no means, or a marriage where you're feeling this is not working out for me, or infidelity or anything like that. I'm just saying, I think in those cases, you should seek wise counsel and make a determination on your steps moving forward. That's my 4 C's when it comes to a successful marriage. There's plenty more, again, like I said, that will work for the dynamic of different women and how they want to see their marriage go and their spouse. But that's just for me. The second question that I pose to the audience is, can you guys list some of the attributes that attain to the Proverbs 31 woman?
She's a businesswoman.
Absolutely. Businesswoman, I see hardworking. Industrious. Being whole in all aspects.
She had initiative.
Absolutely. I think we forget that part. Initiative is huge. Trustworthy, safe. Amazing. The courage. Oh, yeah. I can't keep up. She was strong. I'm seeing them come in. I'm trying to keep up. Honorable. I want to make sure I'm acknowledging everyone.
Integrity, a prayer warrior, good steward of finances.
Absolutely. All of those are exactly what it's pointing to in the Bible of the attributes of a Proverbs 31 woman. A woman of noble character. She's strong, virtuous, courageous, selfless. Reflecting on this passage helped me so much into molding myself to what I needed to be in order to show up as the best me in my marriage. I felt connected in the sense of hearing she's blessed and wants to help others be blessed. I consider myself a modern day Proverbs 31 woman. I dissected it down to the virtuous element and what it entailed. This caused me to allow God to use me and show himself through me and my words, actions, and how I interacted with my husband, my family, strangers, and people in general who I've come in contact with. Earlier, as the question was asked, and I said I've been married for the last 4 years, which is considered the newlywed stage to some. For us, it's another year of marriage adding on to a lifelong commitment. Because again, there's no rule book. Prior to getting married, I wrote a letter to God multiple times, and I should say I was petitioning God on what I wanted and what I saw for my life. Sometimes my faith would waver, not knowing if God was going to be able to deliver what I felt I needed, honestly. Sometimes you come up with this checklist of, God, I want a man who loves the Lord. He's going to be a protector. And at one point, I believed that I started to feel like I wasn't going to be able to check off all those things in that box. Like, God might give me this, but he's not going to bless me in this area. And then I heard God say, I hear you, my child, just continue to walk in obedience and I shall supply all your needs. A little sidebar that I can throw out is, in the waiting period, enjoy the beauty in singleness. Enjoy getting to know you. Healing your past trauma so that you don't come into the relationship and a marriage with baggage. Like, you have to be able to come healed, healthy, and whole to eliminate bringing any toxicity into that situation. So much times we want the marriage, but we're not at the standpoint in which we need to be at to fully give ourselves to that commitment. So that was just a sidebar. But again, I would later begin dating and meeting people, but I will always get clear signs that, that's not who God has for you. Using discernment is going to be critical. And when I say critical, I mean just that. Using discernment and making sure you're actually praying about who you end up with is one of the biggest things ever. Sometimes we can move out of alignment with God for a rush or a temporary satisfaction or a check in the box to say I'm married when it wasn't at all in God's will. A lot of Christian women run to be married because it's, as we know, growing up in the church and in the Bible, they say it's better to marry than to burn. 1 Corinthians 7:9. This is where the Bible takes a strong stance against sexual immorality. So I think we sometimes may rush into a situation knowing that it might not be the best, but you rather do it the right way or what you feel is the right way. And in the end, I like to say God doesn't like to bless mess. And if he didn't actually bless that and put his hands on that, sometimes it might not go the way that you see, because when that thing happens, you'll start to see it quickly fade away because that's not what God had for you to begin with. So again, as that process continued, I was blessed to unite with my now fine, loving husband, Mr. King. And by the grace of God, we were very intentional in dating. But the biggest thing was we were on the same page about our salvation and not wanting to taint that to have premarital sex. Again, I was made new. So this isn't to say that when we start to date, we were both virgins, but this was just my intent. And so was his, because I felt like I had lived in the world and done it my way multiple times and ending up with the same result, that the only thing that was left was to try it God's way. And quoting Albert Einstein, doing the same thing, expecting different results is a sign of insanity. We cannot solve problems with the same thing that we use to create them. And that's just it. While some of you may not be focused on marriage at the moment, one thing that's clear is you may be considering love. There's a difference between love and lust, and abstinence comes from a good comprehension of the difference. Whew. Sometimes, you download and you just like, oh, all right. Fast forward though, we get married. A year later, we become parents to our first child. And it seemed as though everything is happening extremely fast, but at the right pace, all at the same time. I will honestly say it was tough navigating being newly married and a mom all so soon. As in the question stated and posed earlier, I started to lose my identity as an individual and become Mo's wife, and Caro's mom. And it happens so fast sometimes that you don't even realize it. You'll stop doing things you once loved and worry about what everyone else needs. It's very hard to find that balance, like I stated previously. So you have to be on the lookout for those signs that you can quickly readjust and re-engage. The organized thinker and planner point of the femininity that I owe to the femininity for me, we decided to do marriage counseling before actually having like these big crazy problems that arise. The key in that was to be more proactive rather than reactive. The goal in that was we just didn't want to wait until problems arose and then seek counsel. This may be something you want to consider and incorporate in marriage for your life. Sidebar to that is you need to make sure you discern and see who you're actually seeking counsel from as well. We wanted a Christian because that's the foundation in which our marriage was actually built on to begin with. So this tool actually helped with so many different challenges that we face. Even up to the point now, we kind of can go back and say, all right, let's remember this tool. As a woman, many times in marriage, I wanted to be the problem solver and the brains behind it all. I would be extremely quick to speak and slow to hear. I don't know about you guys. I don't know if you guys are amazing listeners and you guys comprehend well, but that is just me. And with the help of Dr. K, aka my mother, I've learned to be an intent listener and not be so quick to share. Becoming an active listener and processing before responding, it became extremely helpful. As a woman, we have to allow our husbands to be the head of the household. Let him lead. We oftentimes want to take over because we know we feel like we can do it better, or we have a better way of doing it, or they may be just slower at completing a thing. But the truth is, patience goes a long way. Throw in little hints, but make sure you're being supportive. 1 Corinthians says, right? Stand that the head of every man is Christ. The head of a wife is her husband, and the head of Christ is God. I don't have it all together, and in my marriage, we still work through things as they arise. But the key was understanding we may not be perfect, but we're perfectly placed together for such a time as this. And that's the God honest truth. Once upon a time, I could not see myself being submissive due to my strong personality. Being married, this became easier because when you have a man that can lead, following him becomes easy. He's the covering of the home as you are the supporting cast member to essentially undergird him, and likewise when the situation calls for it. So as a woman, I learned to ask for help even sometimes when I don't need it, to give my husband that security in knowing I'm safe with you. I know that you have our family's best interests at heart. It's a feeling of just like, yo, you got this. I'm going to step back. This is my job to be the supportive role for you. Being submissive is a huge thing. Nobody wants, I'm sure, I don't know the men in the crowd, nobody wants to go back and forth and toe to toe in a marriage. You're not in a boxing match. So as the Bible says, we have to be obedient in that standpoint and be submissive. How many of you think, hey, it's hard being submissive? Tell the truth, shame the devil. It's okay. Y'all can unmute and speak. How many of you think in your mind, you know, it may be a little hard for me to be submissive? Or do all of you just feel like, you know what? When that time comes, or in my marriage, I am submissive. I know what to do. I know how to handle this situation. I had to make sure my sound was on.
It can be very difficult. It takes much grace, especially if you are a strong, independent woman. Mm-hmm. You know, as you said earlier, it takes a lot of grace. But you have to, once you stay under the covering and know your place. And then I guess sometimes we kind of misunderstand the submissiveness, and it doesn't mean you're a doormat. Mm-hmm. You know, it just means you allow the husband to lead and you give that respect, you know, and not always want to like overtake him in situations. So it is hard, but it's, you know, it's doable.
I saw someone, thank you for that, Dr. K. I saw someone write in the chat, being submissive as long as he's not led by the devil. And again, that ties into the discernment factor even before you get into that situation on who you're marrying. Because that's a huge, who wants to be led by someone that's not even being led by Christ? So I completely understand that. And you have to know the difference and not just say, well, they said, I need to be submissive. You don't want to follow behind nonsense. You definitely have to understand and be able to discern and separate the two. But it gets easier. We're in modern times where it's not like you can't speak your mind or have a say so. My honest opinion is do what works for your marriage and your dynamic, but don't lose your voice or self in the process. I have a list of things that I incorporate in my marriage as a wife that may help you. It's in no particular order, but one of the key things I would say is pray together on a daily, as well as developing your prayer life separately. One of the realest things I've heard is a family that prays together stays together. This helps to eliminate the worries because you're both taking it to God to work through it. I used to make a joke in reference with my husband, and I used to say, if we praying together, that means we shaking hell wide open. They have to be scared of us because it's not just one warrior coming, it's two of them. So when I used to pray, I used to be like, all right, we're going in together on whatever the situation is. And that to me builds a whole different dynamic that, yes, we pray together, but we could also pray separately. It's extremely important. I'd say pray for your husband and validate them. Being a man, period, is hard. So they need our support in a lot of aspects that I think sometimes we might overlook. Again, I think you should develop your goals and passions outside of marriage so that you can still be an individual. Be responsible for your own happiness. What he brings is just a plus. Communicate and set clear-cut boundaries and expectations. Anything left unsaid leaves room for guessing, and none of us are mind readers, so we have to be clear and to the point. Big factor. Keep the respect in the relationship. That's a big thing. Keep the respect in the relationship. Have an abundance mindset. This allows you to elevate in your marriage as you seek out things together, knowing it shall come to pass. Inspire one another. No one wants to live in a one-sided relationship, friendship, and especially not a marriage. Work through your problems privately. Not all counsel is good counsel. You have to use a spirit of discernment in these situations. And, you might want to call your girlfriend and say, hey, me and John are going through this and the third. And you need to leave him. That friend is not in said relationship. It's not a good time venting on social media. As I saw that a lot of times, social media, people want to say, I'm mad at him right now and I'm leaving and because they want the feedback and the validation. In a marriage, that's sacred. You want to keep those things private and to yourself. If it comes to a point where you need counsel, seek out godly counsel that can be able to reunite you guys back if that's what it calls for. Or again, like I stated earlier, being able to differentiate and take different steps to move forward. Keep taking care of your appearance. Comfortability leads to complacency. And we want to show up not only for ourselves, but for our husbands, our men. We have to keep it together and add that flame for the fire to keep going. I know sometimes, I even get comfortable. I'm like, all right, I got to fix up. It's like we do all the things. And then when we get married, we get so comfortable, bonnet on. I'm not doing anything anymore. You have to keep that appearance up for not only them, but for you. Help him feel better and stronger. Your family will be the better for it. Inspire one another and never take each other for granted. It's so easy to get comfortable in your marriage to whereas the smallest thing as a thank you sometimes can be forgotten. You never want to take that and what you've been blessed with for granted, because in a second it can be gone. That little small token of appreciation and thank you, babe. I appreciate you doing that for me. Thank you for grabbing the cereal for me. Thank you for getting the water, and vice versa. It goes an extremely long way. Marriage isn't easy. It takes work, patience, time, understanding, but establishing a solid foundation in Christ so that no storm can blow the house that you guys have built together. My last things are laugh, live, love, but be who God called you to be as a helpmate for who he has blessed you with, and everything will align with God's will. I really genuinely appreciate you guys for allowing me to speak during this time, and I'm truly, 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 truly grateful. I don't want to take up too much time, but my name is 𝐻𝑎𝐧𝐿 again, and thank you so much.
Wow.
Wow.
I could sit here and listen to you for hours. You were so inspiring. As a young wife myself, I feel so blessed hearing from you. We just want to thank you again, Mrs. Kang, for your presentation. I want to ask the audience, do you have any question for Mrs. Kang?
Was submission something that you practiced while dating, or something that came when you guys were married?
I'm gonna be completely honest. This is my opinion because I don't want anybody, to think anything. I couldn't see myself being submissive to someone that's not my husband. So, to be completely honest, I think when I got married, I had to learn and be able to. I had the idea and aspect of what it could possibly look like, but I didn't want to play house or be submissive. What exactly would I be being submissive to would be my thing in that situation, in a relationship standpoint. You're not my husband. Where are you leading me to? So I think, to answer the question, when I got married, that's something that I had to work on, and I made sure to be committed to that and trying different things to see, okay, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And, getting feedback from other marriages that I would role model and emulate after. So no, I didn't practice it in a relationship. I waited until I was married, the real deal, for that one.
Hello, Miss Kang. I hope I got the pronunciation properly. So I have a question. So during singleness, right? And as a single woman, basically we take care of everything ourselves. So we take care of the bills, we do basically everything. How hard was it for you, if it was, for you to basically give up on some of those roles, or to basically trust your husband to handle some of the things when you were basically doing it by yourself?
Oh, okay. It was the most easiest thing in the world, because who wants to pay bills by yourself? Who wants to pay bills by themselves and different things? What I will say, in an honest standpoint, what the hard thing was being able to let go on how I did a thing. If I pay all my bills on the 1st of the month and I ask him on the 3rd, did you pay this? And he's, oh no, I forgot. Those things were very, I would say, like, we had to work on, because that part of it, of when you're independent and you're doing so much things by yourself, you have a way of doing a certain thing. It's like being in a job when you're a leader, right? You were the hard worker, then you get elevated to being the leader in a situation. You kind of still want to have your hands in the situation and say, oh, no, don't worry, I got it. But as a leader, you learn to delegate, right? And in this situation, it's not as though I'm the leader. I have a partner. So with having a partner, it was like, oh, perfect. I could just throw a little hint to you for you to remind you, but I don't have to do this by myself. Some of this money is mine. And it's in general, like taking out the garbage by yourself. I started looking, I was like, he's here, he can do it. I'm grateful. Cleaning, it comes more as a task of like a load off. It helps you share that load. That's what I would say. It wasn't as hard. The thing that was hard was me letting go of the way I did a thing, because I wanted it to be how I did it. And then I just learned to compromise with him. Like, okay, well, you do it this way. I throw a little hint, like, maybe we could try this way and see what works. And then sometimes, you get to have your way in that situation. So, but that wasn't the hard part. No, not at all.
Any other questions?
I see them in the chat, but it's like I can't see per se.
You guys can open your mic and ask the
Yeah.
questions and go.
I have a question. So I want to ask, what are certain things that you did in your season or the time that you were single that helped you to prepare for marriage?
Oh, that was the end of the question. Okay. What are some of the things that I did to help me prepare? I think one of the biggest things was it sounds crazy. I had to date myself. I had to kind of get to know exactly who I was outside of being in a relationship, because oftentimes you want the familiarity of, you know, having someone and being there for someone. And I was just like, all right, what does it feel like to be with me? So that when I do get with somebody, I'm not so on edge or feeling like, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that. I had to kind of learn myself a lot in my period of singleness. And when you're in a relationship, sometimes it kind of goes to the back burner because you're in the lustful stage of like, oh my God, I like this person, I'm getting to know them and this and the third. And you almost want to interject yourself into their world, if that makes sense. So you kind of forget, okay, who am I as Andre? Who am I as Neef? If I'm saying it right, I pray I'm saying it right. So the biggest thing I would say is, honestly, date yourself, get to know you, go take yourself out, do those things so that when somebody else comes into your life and in marriage and dating, anything that they're doing is not a wow or not a shocker. They're not sweeping you off your feet because you knew how to treat yourself, if that makes sense. Like, okay, these are my standards. This is how I feel about me. So when somebody comes to you, they can be correct and they can, you kind of know the standard to set for yourself. And in marriage, that's how I looked at it, like in my single phase of like, all right, this is what I like. These are my boundaries. These are my expectations, because I got to actually know me and just not know me with someone else. If I answered the question.
It's not a question, but there's a question that I always ask persons: would you marry you? So would I marry me? So that is a question that I always ask.
I get it 100%. Could you marry yourself? Is that it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I think younger me couldn't marry myself. I would have been like, oh, no. She is unstable. That is an unstable person. So that is a good question to ask. But then, you know, in some aspects, some people might say, yes, like I could marry me, because when you don't feel like you have any quirks or you're an amazing person, you might say, you know, I'm good to go. And that might actually be the case. But I like that quote. Could you marry you? I like that.
Would you marry?
I have a question. How important is it marrying somebody that is in purpose?
Okay, you have to elaborate the question because I don't want to answer it wrong.
Okay, so how important is it marrying a godly man, knowing his purpose and having something that you can actually submit to him?
Oh, that's the biggest factor. That is one of the biggest factors. Again, it would tie back into, how are you submitting to somebody that doesn't even have a purpose? They can't lead. Again, it will bring back to the point. You cannot lead me anywhere. We're leading. It would be you may not be blind, but it will almost be the interpretation of the blind leading the blind. I need you to know your purpose. You might not have to know it completely, because it may change. Right? You might have to know completely. But being anchored in God in that way is huge, because that leaves room for being unequally yoked, to be completely honest. And when you're unequally yoked, you want to grab that batter and whip it back together so bad, but it was never that to begin with. So having a man know their purpose in Christ is huge. That's one of the biggest elements. You're going to have a one-sided relationship. You're going to start praying, God, please save him for his salvation. I don't know about anybody else. I want to pray for people's salvation for others. But the person who I'm with at that time in marriage, please come please come. We could work through that together before being married, because those are the hiccups you don't want to get to in marriage and realize like, oh man, this might have been the wrong move for, and people elevate and they grow in life, and you could be that support system in that time. But I believe a lot of those situations, being unequally yoked, is leaving room for disaster personally.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have one.
Mm-hmm.
I think somebody wanted to go. You can go ahead. All right. So my question was, what happens when, or what do you do if in the marriage, like you guys started out good and then he loses his job?
Mm-hmm.
And in losing his job, or say you probably are doing something at a higher paying job,
mm-hmm.
How do you maneuver that situation? Like, you know, men depend on their job to feel like men at times. Mm-hmm. Like, what do you do if you probably started out together, but no, he's at home, you're out? Like, how do you like remove that? What do you call that? Awkwardness then, or how you work around that? I don't know if you have ever. I wasn't so similar to that.
I understand exactly what you're saying, right? And for me, again, every marriage is different, but I think my standpoint in a situation for that is when two people get married, right? They become one, right? So if I'm the breadwinner at this point, that doesn't mean I'm the breadwinner forever. I have to be able to, your husband, the person, whether it's, you know, you the female or the male, has to be able to understand that. And it's an ego thing and, you know, insecurity. But I think the reassurance in that factor of like, this is our money. It's not to say you're not providing, because anything I bring in, anything you bring in, that's one pot together. So as long as they are not wallowing in that I lost my job, woe is me type of thing, you kind of got to be that supporter, be like, yo, hello, sir. Get back up out of it. It's not to say that we're out and destitute in a way, because if the shoe was on the other foot, they would say, no, babe, no, hun, whatever the names were. I got this. I got it for us. So who's to say a woman can't be in the same world? We're in 2023. At some time, my job might pay higher than your job. What does that mean? Should I quit for you to lead? You don't have to lead. Finances is not the goal for leadership. That doesn't make you a leader in saying, yo, because I'm more financially set in this area, I could be making more money than you. I'm still going to follow you in that way because I believe in you enough that this is not forever. So it's okay. And I think understanding that is a big issue that men sometimes might have, because I get it. It's like, I'm a man, I should be the one providing. But to be completely honest, your money and my money is the same money, because I still wouldn't have a problem with you making the big bucks and I'm at home. I wouldn't say, I can't believe it. So no, that's my answer. At the end of the day, finances don't equate to who is the leader in a relationship. You the man, you the head of the household, you after Christ, I'm under you. And that's just it. I just happen to have a bigger bag at the moment. So, but don't worry, hun. Your time is coming back and we'll lock back in this together. But no, just be supportive. You got to be that. It's all right.
Thank you.
For sure. I love y'all. This is so fun. I saw a question and I want to answer it. I don't want to make it seem like I'm not looking at it. Is a marriage worth continue when it jeopardizes your happiness and safety? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm not going to be the person to, you know what I mean? And everybody has a different opinion, but at what point is your happiness not forefront? And keep it in mind, not every day are you going to be happy in a marriage. So let's dissect that part. Happiness is a temporary satisfaction that, you know, comes and goes. And you don't have to be happy every day, right? Because there's days in a marriage, and I can attest to that. I'm very transparent. Well, I might not be happy. It's not his fault. He could have pissed me off or not, but at the end of the day, you're not going to be happy every day of the year. So I don't think that happy, you know, but I wouldn't say stay in a situation where you're not happy at all and it's due to a marriage. where you're like, this is not for me. I would never advise anyone in that way. And you know what I mean? Some may say it gets better, and it could, but when it comes to the safety piece, you are the most important thing for you and your family and showing up. So I wouldn't say to stay in a situation, and that's the part where you got to, again, take it to God. And I would hate for anyone to be in an abusive situation and they're praying to, you know, change the person, because at some time you have to use wisdom in a situation and realize this is going to be detrimental to me more than me praying to stay in this covenant that is not what God has for me. So I would say no to that answer. Marriage isn't worth safety at all. I hope I answered the question. What are some?
I think there's another question in the chat.
Okay, I see it now. What are some of the red flags to look for while dating? Oh, there's so many. I mean, I think we could list about 10. But one of the things I would say is, I want to say it in the right way. A lot of people may talk a good game, right? And I think you can see, I want to say this the right way. You can see the harvest and what a tree may bear from its soil, and how you understand the type of fruit that they give, right? And a lot of times people come in and they say a good thing, and you're not seeing anything that's coming from what they're saying, right? It's like smoke, essentially. I think the biggest thing is being able to discern what's real and what's a facade and what's a fantasy for what they think you want to hear in that moment. A lot of times people gaslight and they kind of sell you a dream, like, you know, I'm going to be the greatest, whatever, this and the third. You have to genuinely, I mean this in the most, I feel like I say it so much, like discernment is huge. Discernment is huge, because somebody could really put on an act up until the day that you get to the altar and you're like, whoa, I didn't see it. You might not see any red flags at all, but it's really discerning and asking God, like, all right, is this the person you have for me? Just watch how they move, what they say. Because a lot of times, you know, people can't keep on a mask but for so long. At some point, they got to take it off. And there's certain things I want to say. I would say a red flag is if you meet someone, one of the red flags, if you meet someone and you start off and you guys are like, you know what, we're waiting to have sex or whatever. And then all of a sudden the person is saying, you know, we don't have to wait that long. You should be able to test drive the car before you buy it and all these things. And you kind of know their mind wasn't on that to begin with. You got to kind of watch what people say and how they interject it in there slightly to make you sway from your foundation in which you have with Christ. It's a lot. It's so many. I would say a red flag for me is I used to like to see how people treat their parents, their mother. Because I feel like some situations, the way you treat your mother is how you would treat me to an extent. There's a lot of red flags. I might be missing some by trying to answer the question, but there's so many to look for in dating. See how they handle money. Are they a good steward of money? Or every minute they're broke and they can't find anything? I think that's a huge red flag, because what you do with your money is what you do with our money.
Yes.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Okay, there's no more question. I have a question for the audience. Okay, so she listed 4 C's in her relationship. What are her 4 C's?
Who is the audience?
Christ, communication, compromise and commitment.
That's right.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. And then that note, Sister Trudy, I'm going to ask you to do the vote of thanks for me, please.
All right, so good evening, everyone. Mrs. Andrea Kang, want to give you a big thank you for taking the time out to be with us tonight, for being vulnerable, for imparting knowledge. And of course, one of the greatest blessings of you coming on here to impart knowledge is that you will shorten our learning curve. So some of the things that you've told us, we don't have to go through it. We don't want to experience it. We want to approach life and marriage with caution and with this new knowledge and wisdom, which I think are the foundations also of a successful marriage. Hopefully, we don't just eat it up, but we apply it and, you know, make you happy as our guest tonight and our teacher. All right, so God bless you, and I trust that you'll have a wonderful, a blooming, a prosperous marriage. May it be sweeter as the time goes by. All right.
Thank you so much.
Yes, so I'm just encouraging us as women to not just be hearers, but doers of these wisdom that we have gathered tonight. I want to thank you again for coming on to our platform.
Thank you.
And I just want to remind you that we're asking that you sow into this ministry as we are looking into our in-house summit, and we crave your support in order for this to be a success, in order for it to become a reality. And so I want to thank you again, each and every one, for coming on. Remember to empower each other to arise. God bless you all.
Thank you so much.
Have a great rest of the day.